Hello. Okay. Welcome back. I don't really have anything super profound to say, which is kind of nice. We can more or less jump right in. The only thing I will say is the as per usual, we have a corgi plush over here with a fez on top of their head. I think in the previous videos I've been saying his. I do not know what pronouns they use, so I'm going to say they because they may identify as they, them. I have no idea. And I think that is the most inclusive way to do that. So, at least that I currently know of. I'm very out of the loop when it comes to a lot of that. That being said, Corgi has a fez on their head because fezzes are cool. And with that being said, we can now start 19. Levi didn't ask any questions, and Kath didn't feel like explaining. She told him that her dad was in the hospital, but she didn't tell him why. She thanked him a lot. She pushed a $24 bill into his ashtray and told him she'd give him more or as soon as she got cash. She tried not to look at him because every time she did, she imagined him kissing someone, either her or that other girl, and both memories were equally painful. She waited for him to turn to Levi, the needle to needle her with questions and charming observations. But he left her alone. After about 15 minutes, he asked whether she minded if he listened to a lecture. He had a big final the next day. Go ahead, Cass said. Levi set a digital recorder to the dashboard. They listened to a deep voiced professor talk about sustainable ranching practices for the next 40 minutes. When they got into town, Cass gave Leslie directions. He'd only been to Omaha a few times. When they turned into the hospital parking lot, Cass was sure he'd read the signs. St. Richard's Cemetery for mental health and behavioral health. You can just drop me, she said. I really appreciate this. Levi turned off. Levi turned off the range management lecture. I'd feel a lot better if I saw you in. Kath didn't argue. She walked in ahead of him and went straight to the registration desk. She was half conscious of Levi folding him into a lobby chair behind her. The man at the desk wasn't any good. Avery, he said. Avery Arthur. He clicked his tongue. Doesn't look like he's authorized for visitors. Could Kath talk to a doctor or a nurse? The guy wasn't sure about that. Was her dad awake? He couldn't tell. Federal privacy regulations and all. Well, I'm just going to sit over there, Kath said, so maybe you could tell somebody that I'm waiting, that I'd like to see my dad. The guy, he was a big guy, more like a muscled up orderly than a receptionist or a nurse, told her that she was welcome to sit all she wanted. She wondered if this guy had been here when they brought her dad in. Did they have to restrain him? Was he screaming? Was he spitting? She wanted everyone here, starting with this guy, to know that her dad was a person, not just a crazy person. That he had people who cared about him, that uh, cared about him, and who would notice if he was roughed up or given the wrong medicine. Kath huffed down into a chair where the no good orderly could see her. 10 minutes of silence passed before Levi said, No luck? Same old luck, she glanced over at him, but not at his face. Look, I'm probably here for the long haul. You should head back. Levi leaned forward on his knees, scrubbing at the back of his hair like he was thinking about it. I'm not going to leave you alone in the hospital waiting room, he said finally. But all I can do now is wait. So this is the perfect place for me. He shrugged and sat back, still rubbing his neck. I may as well see you through. You might need a ride later. Okay, Cass said, uh, then forced herself to keep going. Thank you. This isn't going to be a regular thing, you know. I promise not to call you the next time one of my relatives gets drunk or goes crazy. Levi took off his green jacket and laid it on the seat next to him. He was wearing a black sweater and black jeans, and he was holding his digital recorder. He pushed it into his pocket. Wonder if there's coffee around here, he said. St. Richard wasn't a regular hospital. Nothing but the waiting room was open to the public, and the waiting room was more like a hallway with chairs. There wasn't even a TV hanging in the corner tuned to Fox News. Levi stood up and moseyed over to the orderly's window. He leaned forward on the counter and started to make conversation. Kath felt a surge of irritation and got out her phone to text Ren. At St. Richard's, waiting to see Dad, she thought about calling her grandma, but decided to wait until she had more information. When she looked up from her phone, Levi was being buzzed through the main doors. He glanced back at her just before they closed behind him and smiled. It had been so long since Levi smiled at her. Kath's heart leapt up into her sinuses. It made her eyes water. He was gone a long time. Maybe he was getting a tour, she thought. He'd probably come back with a pitcher of beer, lipstick all over his face, and Fiesta Bowl tickets. Kath didn't have anything to distract herself with except her phone, but the battery was low, so she shoved it into her bag and tried not to think about it. Eventually, she heard a buzz, and Levi walked back through the doors, holding two disposable coffee cups and balancing two boxed sandwiches on his forearms. Turkey or ham? He asked. Why are you always feeding me? Well, I work in food service, and my major is basically grazing. Turkey, she said, feeling grateful, but still not feeling like she could look Levi in the eyes. She knew what it was like. His eyes were warm and baby blue. They made you feel like he they made you feel like he liked you better than other people. She took a cup of coffee. How did you get back there? I just asked about coffee, he said. Kath unwrapped the sandwich and started tearing off bite-sized pieces. She pinched them flat before pushing them into her mouth. Her mom used to tell her not to mutilate her food. Her dad never said anything. His table manners were much worse. You can, Levi said, unwrapping a sandwich. Can what? Call me the next time somebody goes crazy or gets arrested. I was glad you called me tonight. I thought you were mad at me. Kath smashed another chunk of sandwich. Mustard oozed out of the sides. Are you the guy who everybody calls when they need help? Am I Superman? She could hear him smiling. You know what I mean. Are you the guy all your friends call when they need help because they know you'll say yes? I don't know, he said. I'm the guy everybody calls when they need help moving. I think it's the truck. When I called you tonight, she said to her shoes, I knew that you'd give me a ride if you could. Good, he said. You were right. I think I might be exploiting you. He laughed. You can't exploit me against my will. Kath took a sip of the coffee. It tasted nothing like a gingerbread latte. Are you worried about your dad? Levi asked. Yeah, she said, and no, she glanced over at him quickly. This isn't the first time. This just happens. Usually it doesn't get this bad. Usually we're there for him. Levi held his sandwich one Levi held his sandwich by one corner and took a bite from the other. Are you too worried about your dad to talk about why you're mad at me? His mouth was full. It's not that important, she muttered. It is to me, he swallowed. You leave the room every time I walk in. Kath didn't say anything, so he kept talking. Is it because of what happened? She didn't know how to answer that question. She didn't want to. She looked up She looked up at the wall across from her, up where there'd been a TV. If this place wasn't such a prison, she felt Levi lean toward her. Because I'm sorry about that, he said. I didn't mean to make you feel uncomfortable. Cass pinched the top of her nose, wishing she knew where her tear ducts were so she could hold them close. You're sorry? I'm sorry I upset you, he said. I think maybe I was reading you wrong, and I'm sorry about that. Her brain tried to come up with something mean to say about Levi and reading. You didn't read me wrong, she said, shaking her head just for a second. She felt more angry than pathetic. I went to your party. What party? She turned her head to face him, even though she'd started to cry, and her glasses were fogging up, and she hadn't officially brushed her hair since yesterday morning. The party, she said. At your house, that Thursday night. I came with Reagan. Why didn't I see you? You were in the kitchen. preoccupied. Levi's smile faded, and he sat back slowly. Kath set her sandwich down on the chair next to her and clenched her hands in her lap. "Oh, Kath," Levi said. "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize. You both seem pretty happy about it. You didn't say you were coming." She looked over. "So if you'd known I was coming, you wouldn't have been making out with somebody else in the kitchen?" For once, Levi didn't have anything to say. He set his sandwich down, too, and pushed both hands through his wispy blonde hair. His hair was made out of finer stuff than Kath's, silk, down, blown out dandelion seeds. "Kath," he said, "I'm so sorry." She wasn't quite sure what he was apologizing for. He looked up at her from the top of his eyes, looking genuinely sorry and sorry for her. "It was just a kiss," he said, pleating his forehead. "Which one?" she asked. Levi pushed his hands to the back of his head, and his bangs felt loose. "Both of them." Kath took a deep, shaky breath and let it go through her nose. "Right," she said. "That's good information to have. I didn't think—" "Levi." She cut him off and looked him straight in the eye, trying to look stern despite her tears. "I can't thank you enough for bringing me here, but I couldn't mean this more. I'd just like it. I'd like it. I can't thank you enough for bringing me here, but I couldn't mean this more. I'd like it if you left now. I don't just kiss people. Kisses aren't just with me. That's why I've been avoiding you. That's why I'd like to avoid you now. Okay?" "Kath." The door buzzed, and a nurse stepped through it, wearing flowered scrubs. She smiled at Levi. "You guys want to come back now?" Kath stood up and grabbed her bag. She looked at Levi. "Please." And then she followed the nurse. Levi was gone when Kath came back to the lobby. She took a cab to her dad's office to get his car. It was full of fast food wrappers and crumpled up ideas. When she got home, she did the dishes and texted Ren. Kath didn't feel like calling. She didn't feel like saying, "Hey, you were right. He's all drugged up and probably won't come out of it for a few days, and there's no real reason for you to come home unless you just can't stand the idea of him going through this alone. But he won't be alone because I'll be here." Her dad hadn't done the laundry for a while. The steps to the basement were covered with dirty clothes, like he'd just been throwing stuff down there for a few weeks. He started a load of laundry, or she started a load of laundry. She threw out pizza boxes with desiccated slices of pizza. There was a poem painted on the bathroom mirror with toothpaste. Maybe it was a poem. Maybe it was just words. It was lovely, so Kath took a photo with her phone before she swiped it clean. Any one of these things would have tipped them off if they'd been at home. They looked out for him. They'd find him sitting in his car in the middle of the night, filling page after page with ideas that didn't quite make sense, and they'd lead him back inside. They'd see him skip dinner, they'd count the cups of coffee, they'd notice the zeal in his voice, and they'd try to rein him back in. Usually it worked. Seeing that they were scared, is that scared or scarred? Oh my god, I can't tell. I think it's scared. Seeing that they were scared terrified their dad. He'd go to bed and sleep for 15 hours. He'd make an appointment with his counselor. He'd try the meds again, even if they all knew it wouldn't stick. "I can't think when I'm on them," he told Kath one night. She was 16, and she'd come downstairs to check the front door and found it unlocked. And then she'd inadvertently locked him out. Her dad had been sitting outside on the steps, and it scared her half to death when he rang the doorbell. "They slow your brain down," he said, clutching an orange bottle of pills. "They iron out all the wrinkles. Maybe all the bad stuff happens in the wrinkles, but all the good stuff does too. They break your brain like a horse, so it takes all your orders. I need a brain that I can break away. I need to think. If I can't think, who am I?" I wasn't so bad, or it wasn't so bad when he got lots of sleep, when he ate the eggs they made him for breakfast, when he didn't work straight through 3 weekends in a row. A little manic was okay. A little manic made him happy and productive and charismatic. Clients would eat awesome straight out of his hands. She and Ren had gotten good at watching him and noticing when a little manic slid into a lot. When charismatic gave way to crazed, when the twinkle in his eyes turned into a burnt out flash. Kath stayed up until 3 o'clock that morning, cleaning up his messes. If she and Ren had been here, they would have seen this coming. They would have stopped it. The next day, Kath took her laptop to St. Richard's with her. She had 31 hours to write her short story. She could email it to Professor Piper. That would be okay. Ren finally texted her back. Are you here? Psych final tomorrow, right? They had the same psychology professor, but were in different classes. I'll have to miss it, Kath typed. Not acceptable, Ren replied. Not leaving Dad alone. Kath texted back. Email the professor. Maybe he'll let you make it up. Okay. Email him and I'll talk to him. Okay. Kath couldn't bring herself to say thanks. Ren should be missing that final too. Her dad woke up around noon and ate mashed potatoes with yellow gravy. She could tell he was angry. Angry that he was there and angry that he was too groggy for any of his anger to rise to the top. There was a TV in his room, and Kath found a Gilmore Girls rerun. Their dad always used to watch Gilmore Girls with them. He had such a crush on Suki. Kath's computer kept falling asleep in her lap, so she finally set it down and leaned onto his bed to watch TV. Where's Ren? He asked during a commercial break. School. Shouldn't you be there too? Christmas break starts tomorrow. He nodded. His eyes looked dull and distant. Every time he blinked, it seemed like maybe he wasn't going to manage to open them again. A nurse came in at 2 in the afternoon with more meds. Then came a doctor who asked Kath to wait in the hall. The doctor smiled at her when he left the room. We'll get there, he said, in a cheerful, comforting voice. We had to bring him down pretty fast. Kath sat next to her dad's bed and watched TV until visiting hours were over. There was no more cleaning to do, and Kath felt uneasy being in the house by herself. She tried sleeping on the couch, but it felt too close to the outside and too close to her dad's empty room. So she went up to her room and crawled into her bed, or into her own bed. When that didn't work, she climbed into Ren's bed, taking her laptop with her. Their dad stayed at St. Richard's 3 times before. The first time was the summer after their mom left. They called their grandma when he couldn't get out of bed, and for a while she'd moved in with them. She'd fill the freezer with frozen lasagna before she moved out. The second time was in 6th grade. He was standing over the sink, laughing, and telling them that they didn't have to go to school anymore. Life was an education, he said. He'd cut himself shaving. There was a tiny there was there were tiny pieces of toilet paper stuck with blood to his chin. Kath and Ren had gone to stay with their Aunt Lynn in Chicago. The third time was in high school. They were 16, and their grandma came to stay, but not until the second night. That first night they'd spent in Ren's bed. Ren holding Kath's wrist and Kath crying. It's not like him, she whispered. You're not, Ren said. I am. I'm crazy like him. She was already having panic attacks. She was already hiding at parties. In 7th grade, she'd been late to class for the first 2 weeks because she couldn't stand being in the halls with everyone else during passing periods. It's probably going to get worse in a few years. That's when it usually kicks in. You're not, Ren said, but what if I am? Decide not to be. That's not how it works, Kath argued. Nobody knows how it works. What if I don't even see it coming? I'll see it coming. Kath tried to stop crying, but she'd been crying so long that crying had taken over, making her breathe in harsh sniffs and jerks. If it tries to take you, Ren said, I won't let go. A few months later, Kath gave that line to Simon in a scene about Baz's bloodlust. Ren was still writing with Kath back then, and when she got to the line, she snorted. I'm here for you if you go manic, Ren said, but you're on your own if you become a vampire. What good are you anyway? Cass said. Their dad was home by then, and better, and Kath didn't feel, for the moment, like her DNA was a trap ready to snap closed on her. Apparently, I'm good for something, Ren said. You keep stealing all my best lines. Kath thought about texting Ren Friday night before she fell asleep, but she couldn't think of anything to say. The humdrum wasn't a man at all, or a monster. It was a boy. Simon stepped closer, perhaps foolishly, wanting to see its face. He felt the humdrum's power whipping around him, like dry air, like hot sand, and aching fatigue in the very marrow of Simon's bones. The humdrum, the boy, wore faded denim and a grotty t-shirt, and it probably took Simon far too long to recognize the child as himself. His self, his years ago self. Stop it, Simon shouted. Show yourself, you coward. Show yourself. The boy just laughed. From Chapter 23, Simon Snow and the Seventh Oak. Copyright 2010 by Gemma T. Leslie. I just need this. This right here. There we go. Okay. Oh. Sorry, I just need a moment. I should probably pause if I need a moment. Nah, we're good. Let's keep going on. All right. 20. Her dad and Ren came home on the same day, Saturday. Her dad was already talking about going back to work, even though his meds were still off, even though he'd seemed alternately drunk or half asleep. Kath wondered if he'd stay on them through the weekend. Maybe it would be okay if he went off his meds. She and Ren were both home now to watch out for him. With everything that happened, Kath wasn't quite sure whether she and Ren were on speaking terms. She decided that they were. It made life easier, but they weren't on sharing terms. She still hadn't told Ren anything about Levi, or about Nick, for that matter, and she didn't want Ren to start talking about her adventures with their mom. Kath was sure Ren had some mother-daughter Christmas plans. At first, all Ren wanted to talk about was school. She felt good about her finals, did Kath? And she'd already bought her books for the next semester. What classes was Kath taking? Did they have any together? Kath mostly listened. Do you think we should call Grandma? Ren asked. About what? About Dad. Let's wait and see how he does. All their friends from high school were home for Christmas. Ren kept trying to get Kath to go out. You go, Kath would say. I'll stay with Dad. I can't go with you. That would be weird. It would seem weird to their high school friends to see Ren without Kath. Their college friends would think it was weird if they showed up anywhere together. Somebody should stay with Dad, Kath said. Go, Kath. Their dad said after a few days of this. I'm not going to lose control sitting here watching Iron Chef. Sometimes Kath went. Sometimes she stayed home and waited for Ren. Sometimes Ren didn't come home at all. I don't want you to see me shit-faced, Ren explained when she rolled in one morning. You make me uncomfortable. Oh, I make you feel uncomfortable? Kath said. That's priceless. Their dad went back to work after a week. The next week he started jogging before work, and that's how Kath knew he was off his meds. Exercise was his most effective self-medication. It's what he always did when he was trying to take control. She started coming downstairs every morning when she heard the coffee maker beeping to check on him, to see him off. It's way too cold to jog outside. She tried to argue one morning. Her dad handed his coffee, decaf, while he laced up his shoes. It feels good. Come with me. He could tell she was trying to look in his eyes, to take his mental temperature, so he took her chin and let her. I'm fine, he said gently. Back on the horse, Kath. What's the horse? She sighed, watching him pull on a South High hoodie. Jogging? Working too much? Living, he said, a little too loud. Life is the horse. Kath would make him breakfast while he ran, and after he ate and left for work, she'd fall back asleep on the couch. After a few days of this, it already felt like a routine. Routines were good for her dad, but he needed something. He needed help. He needed help sticking to them. Kath would usually wake up again when Ren came downstairs or Kath came home. This morning, Ren walked into the house and immediately headed into the kitchen. She came back into the living room with a cup of coffee, licking a fork. Did you make omelets? Kath rubbed her eyes and nodded. We had leftovers from Las Portales. I really hope I said that right. So I threw them in. She sat up. That's decaf. He's drinking decaf? That's good, right? Yeah. Make me an omelet, Kath. You know I suck at it. What will you give me? Kath asked. Ren laughed. Yeah, it's what they used to say to each other. What will you give me? What do you want? Ren asked. Do you have any chapters you need betayed? I have never seen that word in my life. Oh my freaking god. Sorry, I just that went through me. Oh my god. It was Cass' turn to say something clever, but she didn't know what to say because she knew that Ren didn't mean it about betaying her fig. And because it was pathetic how much Kath wished that she did. What if they spent the rest of Christmas break like that, crowded around a laptop, writing the beginning and the end of Carry On Simon together? Nah, Kath said finally. I've got a doctoral student in Rhode Island editing all my stuff. She's a machine. Kath stood up and headed for the kitchen. I'll make you an omelet. I think we've got some canned chili. Wren followed. She jumped onto the counter next to the stove and watched Kath get the milk and eggs from the refrigerator. Kath could crack them one-handed. Eggs were her thing. Breakfast, really. She learned to make omelets in junior high. Watching YouTube videos, she could do poached eggs too, and sunny side up, and scrambled, obviously. Wren was better at dinners. She'd gone through a phase in junior high when everything she made started with French onion soup mix, meatloaf, beef stroganoff, onion burgers. All we need is soup mix, she'd announced. We can throw all these other spices away. You girls don't have to cook, their dad would say, but it was either cook or hope he remembered to pick up Happy Meals on the way home from work. There was still a toy box upstairs packed with hundreds of plastic Happy Meal toys. Besides, if Kath made breakfast and Ren made dinner, that was at least two meals. That was at least two meals their dad wouldn't eat at a gas station. Quick Trip isn't a gas station, you'd say. It's an everything you really need station. And their bathrooms are immaculate. Ren leaned over the pan and watched the eggs start to bubble. Kath pushed Kath pushed her back away from the fire. This is the part I always mess up, Ren said. Either I burn on the outside or it's still raw in the middle. You're too impatient, Kath said. No, I'm too hungry. Kath picked up the can opener and spun around her finger. Do you think we should call Grandma? Well, tomorrow's Christmas Eve, Kath said, so we 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 should probably call Grandma. You know what I mean. He seems like he's doing okay. Yeah. Ren cranked open a can of chili and handed it to Kath. But he's still fragile. Any little thing could throw him off. What'll happen when we go back to school, when you're not here to make breakfast? He needs somebody to look out for him. Kath watched the eggs. She was biding her time. We still have to go shopping for Christmas dinner. Do you want turkey? Or we could do lasagna in Grandma's honor. Maybe a lasagna tomorrow and turkey on Christmas. I won't be here tomorrow night, Ren cleared her throat. That's when Laura's family celebrates Christmas. Kath nodded and folded the omelet in half. You could come, Ren said. Kath snorted. When she glanced up again, Ren looked upset. What? Kath said. I'm not arguing with you. I assumed you were doing something. I assumed you were doing something with her this week. Ren clenched her jaw so tight her cheeks pulsed. I can't believe you're making me do this alone. Kath held up the spatula between them. Making you? I'm not making you do anything. I can't believe you're even doing this when I know how much you hate it. Ren shoved off the counter, shaking her head. Oh, you hate everything? You hate change? If I didn't drag you along behind me, you'd never get anywhere. Well, you're not dragging me anywhere now, Cass said, turning away from the stove, or anywhere from now on. You are hereby released of all responsibility, dragging me along. Wren folded her arms and tilted her head, the sanctimonious one. That's not what I meant, Kath. I meant we should be doing this together. Why this? You're the one who keeps reminding me that we're two separate people, that we don't have to do all the same things all the time. So fine, you can go have a relationship with the parent who abandoned us, and I'll stay here and take care of the one who picked up the pieces. Jesus Christ. Ran threw her hands in the air, palms out. Could you stop being so melodramatic for just 5 minutes, please? No. Cass slashed the air with her spatula. This isn't melodrama. This is actual drama. She left us in the most dramatic way possible on September 11th, after September 11th. Details. She left us. She broke Dad's heart and maybe his brain, and she left us. Wren's voice dropped. She feels terrible about it, Kath. Good, Kath shouted. So do I. She took a step closer to her sister. I'm probably going to be crazy for the rest of my life, thanks to her. I'm going to keep making fucked up decisions and doing weird things that I don't even realize are weird. People are going to feel sorry for me, and I won't ever have any normal relationships. And it's always going to be because I didn't have a mother. Always. That's the ultimate kind of broken. The kind of damage you never recover from. I hope she feels terrible. I hope she never forgives herself. Don't say that. Ren's face was red, and there were tears in her eyes. I'm not broken. There weren't any tears in Cass' eyes. In your cracks in your found. Yeah, there weren't any tears in Cass' eyes. Cracks in your foundation. She shrugged. Fuck that. Do you think I absorbed all the impact? Do you think that when Mom left, it hit my side of the car? Fuck that, Ren. She left you too, but it didn't break me. Nothing can break me unless I let it. Do you think Dad let it? Do you think he chose to fall apart when she left? Yes, Ren was shouting now, and I think he keeps choosing. I think you both do. You'd rather be broken than move on. That did it. Now they were both crying, both shouting. Nobody wins until nobody wins. Kath thought. She turned back to the stove. The eggs were starting to smoke. Dad's sick, Ren, she said as calmly as she could manage. She scraped the omelet out of her pan and dropped it onto the plate. And your omelet's burnt, and I'd rather be broken than wasted. She set the plate onto the counter. You can tell Laura to go fuck herself, like to infinity and beyond. She doesn't get to move on. She doesn't get to move on with me ever. Kath walked away before Ren could. She went upstairs and worked on Carry On. There was always a Simon Snow marathon on TV on Christmas Eve. Kath and Ren always watched it, and their dad always made microwave popcorn. They had gone to Jacob's the night before the popcorn, or they'd gone to Jacob's the night before for popcorn and other Christmas supplies. If they don't have it at Super Supermercado, their dad said happily, you don't really need it. That's how they ended up making lasagna with spaghetti noodles and buying tamales instead of a turkey. With the movies on, it was easy for Kath not to talk to Ren about anything important, but hard not to talk about the movies themselves. Baz's hair is sick. When what Ren said during Slime Snow and the Selkies 4, all the actors had longer hair in this movie. Baz's hair was swept up into a slick pompadour that started at his knife point widow's peak. I know, Kath said. Simon keeps trying to punch him just so he could touch it. Right? The last time Simon swung at Baz, I thought he was gonna brush away an eyelash. Make a wish, Cass said in her best Simon voice. You handsome bastard. Their dad watched Simon Snow and the fifth blade with them, with a notebook on his lap. I've lived with you two for so long, he said, sketching a big bowl of gravioli. I went to see the new X-Men movie with Kelly, and I was convinced the whole time that Professor X and Magneto were in love. Well, obviously, Ren said. Sometimes I think you're obsessed with Basilton, Agatha said on screen, her eyes wide and concerned. He's up to something, Simon said. I know it. That girl is worse than Lisa Minnelli, their dad said. An hour into the movie, just before Simon caught Baz uh, rendezvousing with Agatha in the Veiled Forest, Ren got a text and got it from the couch. Kath decided to use the bathroom, just in case the doorbell was about to ring. Laura wouldn't do that, right? She wouldn't come to the door. Kath stood in the bathroom near the door and heard her. Kath stood in the bathroom near the door and heard her dad telling Ren to have a good time. I'll tell Mom you said hi, Ren said to him. That's probably not necessary, he said, cheerfully enough. Go, Dad, Kath thought. After Ren was gone, neither of them talked about her. They watched one more Simon movie and ate giant pieces of spaghetti lasagna, and her dad realized for the first time they didn't have a Christmas tree. How did we forget a tree? He asked, looking at the spot by the window seat uh, where they usually put it. There was a lot going on, Cass said. Why couldn't Santa get out of bed on Christmas? Her dad asked, like he was setting up a joke. I don't know. Why? Because he's North bipolar. God. No, Cass said, because the bipolar bears were really bringing him down. Because Rudolph's nose just seemed too bright. Because the chimneys make him claustrophobic. Because, her dad laughed, the highs and the lows were too much for him. On the sled. Get it? That's terrible, Cass said, laughing. Her dad's eyes looked bright, but not too bright. She waited for him to go to bed after she went upstairs. Ren still wasn't home. Kath tried to write, but closed her laptop after 15 minutes of staring at a blank screen. She crawled under her blankets and tried not to think about it. Tried not to think about Ren. Tried not to picture her in Laura's new house with Laura's new family. Kath tried not to think of anything at all. When she cleared her head, she was surprised to find Levi there underneath all the clutter. Levi in God's country, probably having the merriest Christmas of them all. Merry. That was Levi 365 days a year. On leap year, 366. Levi probably loved leap years. Another day, another girl to kiss. It was a little easier to think about him now that Kath knew she'd never have him, that she'd probably never see him again. She fell asleep thinking about his dirty blonde hair and his overabundant forehead and everything else that she wasn't quite ready to forget. Since there isn't a tree, their dad said, I put your presents under this photo of us standing next to a Christmas tree in 2005. Do you know that we don't have any houseplants? There's nothing alive in this house but us. Kath looked down at her small heap of gifts and laughed. They were drinking eggnog and eating 2-day-old pandils. Sweet bread with a powdery pink icing. The pandils came from Abel's bakery. They'd stopped there after the supermercado. Kath had stayed in the car. She figured it wasn't worth the awkwardness. It'd been months since she'd stopped returning Abel's occasional texts, and at least a month since he'd stopped sending them. Abel's grandma hates my hair, Ren said when she got back into the car. Que pena, que lastima, Nino. I apologize for who I offended if I did not pronounce those right. Did you get the tres cakes? Kath asked. They were out. Que lastima. Normally Kath would I also have no idea what any of that means. I just feel extra bad for admitting that. But anyway, normally Kath would have a present from Abel and one from his family under the tree. The pile of presents this year was especially thin, mostly envelopes. Kath gave Wren a pair of Ecuadorian mittens that she'd bought outside of the Union. It's alpaca, she said, warmer than wool and hypoallergenic. Thanks, Wren said, smoothing out the mittens in her lap. So I want my gloves back, Kath said. Wren gave Kath two t-shirts she'd bought online. They were cute and would probably be flattering, but this was the first time in 10 years that Wren hadn't given her something to do with Simon Snow. It made Kath feel tearful suddenly and defensive. Thanks, she said, folding the shirts back up. These are really cool. iTunes gift certificates from her dad, bookstore gift certificates from her grandma. Aunt Lynn had sent them underwear and socks just to be funny. After their dad opened after their dad opened his gifts, everybody gave him clothes. There was still a small silver box under the Christmas tree photo. Kath reached for it. There was a fancy tag hanging by a burgundy ribbon. Cather, it said, in showy black script. For a second, Kath thought it was from Leroy. Cather, she could hear him say, everything about his voice smiling. She untied the ribbon and opened the box. There was a necklace inside, an emerald, her birthstone. She looked up at Wren and saw a matching pendant hanging from her neck. Kath dropped the box and stood up, moving quickly, clumsily, toward the stairs. Kath, Wren called after her, let me explain. Kath shook her head and ran the rest of the way to her room. Kath tried to picture her mom, the person who had given her this necklace. Wren said she was remarried now and living in a big house in the suburbs. She had stepkids too, grown ones. In Kath's head, Laura was still young. Too young. Always said to have yeah, everyone always said to have two big girls. That always made their mom smile. When they were little and their mom and dad would fight, Wren and Kath worried about their parents were going to get divorced and split them up, just like in The Parent Trap. I'll go with Dad, Wren would say. He needs more help. Kath would think about living alone with her dad, spacey and wild, or alone with her mom, chilly and impatient. No, she said, I'll go with Dad. He likes me more than Mom does. He likes both of us more than Mom does, Wren argued. Those can't be yours, people would say. You're too young to have such grown-up girls. I feel too young, their mom would reply. Then we'll both stay with Dad, Kath said. That's not how divorce works, dummy. When their mom left either when their mom left without either of them, in a way it was a relief. If Kath had chose between everyone, she'd choose Wren. Their bedroom door didn't have a lock, so Kath was against it, but nobody came up the stairs. She sat on her hands and cried like a little kid. Too much crying, she thought. Too many kinds. She was tired of being the one who cried. You're the most powerful magician in 100 ages. The humdrum's face. Yeah. You're the most powerful magician in 100 ages. The humdrum's face, Simon's own boyhood face, looked dull and tired. Nothing glinted in its blue eyes. Do you think that much power comes without sacrifice? Did you think you could become you without leaving me behind? From Chapter 23, Simon Snow and the Seventh Oak, copyright 2010 by Gemma T. Leslie. All right, I am going to take a break, and then I will resume reading more later this afternoon. So I hope that has been enjoyable, and thank you once again for being here with me for this. And yeah, that's kind of about it. Without me getting overly sentimental about it. I don't want to do that like every single time. So before I involuntarily go into a ramble, yep, I'm just gonna end the recording. So.